Hello, everyone. Welcome to my talk. I would like to begin with an acknowledgement of country. Even though we might be listening from different places, I am currently recording in Wurundjeri land. So I would like to acknowledge the people of the Wurrung and Bunurong language groups, the Eastern Kulin nations, on whose unceded lands I am currently recording my talk and where I conduct my research and my projects. And I respectfully acknowledge their ancestors, elders, past and present. Hi, I'm Michelle Chen. I'm a game developer. I have more than 10 years of experience in programming, design, and production. I also have some experience with art. I am one of GameIndustry.biz 100 Future Talent and one of Xbox Women in Gaming Game Changers. But I am currently pursuing a PhD in design at RMIT, and my research is called Mental Jam, which is a series of game jam workshops where I co-create video games with young people about their lived experiences of depression and anxiety as a form of self-expression, as well as to build empathy and promote mental health awareness in the community. Mental health is a vital part of our health and well-being. It has been defined by the World Health Organization as a state of well-being where someone can recognize their own abilities, handle normal life stress, work productively, and contribute to their community. In 2015, the United Nations actually included the promotion of mental health and well-being for the first time in their Sustainable Development Goals. And according to the World Health Organization, it is important to engage and empower people with lived experience of mental illness by closely collaborating with them in the promotion of mental health advocacy. One of the goals of the World Health Organization's mental health action plans is to decrease stigma and discrimination by educating the public through mental health awareness campaigns. Also, a visible shift of focus from mental illness treatment to the promotion of mental health, well-being, and resilience. And one of the ways to promote mental health is through the knowledge translation of lived experiences through different artistic mediums. Knowledge translation is a term used to describe how knowledge is disseminated, exchanged, and applied from a range of participants and perspectives. Prior research in this area has used different artistic methods as a form of knowledge translation of the lived experiences to promote mental health. While video games inspire players to gain a more insightful understanding of other people's experiences. Video game development is also multidisciplinary, covering design, art, storytelling, music, and programming, which gives multiple platforms for people with lived experience to tell their stories, such as through the narrative, art, music, or game mechanics. Empathy games are games that hope to inspire players to walk a mile in someone else's shoes. In recent years, there has been an emergence of deeply personal video games about game developers' experiences with mental illness. While autobiographical games is a term introduced by Sandra Danilovic in her PhD research, which are games that explore a game developer's autobiographical experiences of illness as a form of self-care, understanding, and therapy. For her research, her participants were invited to create a video game based on their personal experiences with mental illness, including depression and anxiety. And her research demonstrated that the game development process of these type of games are therapeutic as they embody the four aspects of creative making. The first is social poiesis, which is the social aspect of creative making. For her research, her game developers work on their games individually, but they are located in the same physical space. So it provides the participants with a safe space to share their lived experience stories and inspire one another. And it's autopoiesis, which is a self-reflective aspect of creative making, which encourages her participants to reflect on their lived experience stories as they incorporate them into the development of their games. And there is fabulopoiesis, which is the process where the participants reimagine themselves through metaphors and analogies through game design. There is logopoiesis, which is the process where participants implement their game design through game development implementation and programming. These aspects of creative making allows the participants to develop a new perspective of their lived experiences, which in her research found to be therapeutic. The focus of her research is game development as a form of therapy for the developers themselves. The games were not released to the public. The existing games about the lived experiences of depression and anxiety, including Danilovic's research, are often developed in isolation by solo or small teams of game developers. For Danilovic's research, her participants were developing their games on their own, which suggests that they had all the skills required, including design, programming, and art. While some game developers adopted different participatory design methods to collaborate and get feedback from their lay participants with lived experience during the development of their games. There are also different levels of participation, as defined by Miller-Rushing. The first is contribution, where the public can contribute to data. I will give an example later on in the presentation. The second is collaborative, where in addition to contributing data, the public can also collaborate with the researcher in the project design, analysis, and distribution of the findings. And finally, the third one is co-creation, where researchers and the public work closely together in most or all aspects of the project. Different levels of participation have their advantages as well as limitations and demands and expectations. For my project, I've chosen co-creation. Even though this requires the highest degree of involvement from participants, it establishes them as co-researchers who have the ultimate control of how their lived experiences are presented in the video games. This is an example of a previous project of mine which used contributions. So I wanted to create a video game that's based on my personal experiences with depression, but I also wanted to incorporate other people's points of views. So I used this website called HitRecord where I gathered contributions from people on the website and I invited them to share their stories. And I just asked a very simple question, which is, what does depression feel like to you? And I got over 100 submissions and people shared their stories. And for example, one of this story, she said that she feels like she always has to wear a mask. And this was before COVID time. So the mask she's talking about is a smile that she puts on her face to hide her feelings. And that really resonated with me because that's also how I am as a person. And I tried to incorporate that into the game, where in one of the scenes, the character is standing in front of a mirror and you could draw a smile on your face. In research, I'm using participatory action research, which is a user-centered approach where participants are the real experts of their experience. The advantages of this approach is that researchers work with their participants in all phases of the research, from the design to execution and dissemination, and it ensures that there is a balance of power dynamics between the researcher and participants. And to ensure that participants' experiential knowledge is valued and represented in the final output of the researchers may be required to go beyond conventional methods, such as exploring different arts-based knowledge translation strategies and the use of game jams. Game jams have been adopted as a participatory design method by researchers to explore solutions to real-world problems. They are events that promote the participation of multidisciplinary teams to co-create video games based on a given theme from start to finish. They are fast-paced events that occur in a short amount of time, ranging from 48 hours to a month, sometimes in physical locations and sometimes online. And they promote community building through a shared experience of being in the same location and a mutual interest in game development. It is also a low stakes and experimental environment that allows participants from different disciplines to collaborate and produce new knowledge. Have also been compared to performative artworks where the video games co-created through group participation and the development process is just as important as the games produced. And game jam facilitators have been compared to co-curators who work closely with their community to ensure that the game jams are accessible and engaging to their participants. Game jam participants are also empowered by the shared ownership of developing a video game from start to finish. For my research, I recruited young people who are aged 18 to 25 with self-identified lived experience of depression and or anxiety, who are currently, by their own account, sufficiently well to participate in research and have an interest in gaming or learning game development. I also recruited game developers aged 18 and above, which include programmers, artists, game designers, writers, and musicians. Due to the current pandemic, the game jams and all the other research activities are conducted online using Microsoft Teams, and it allows participants from different countries to participate. I'm still recruiting more participants for the research. Anyone who is interested can contact me via email or social media, and I can provide you with more information as well as to answer any questions. And for my research approach, the first thing I did is I interviewed my participants with the experience of depression and anxiety, and they are invited to give an uninterrupted account of their experience, and they are free to share as much as they are comfortable with. I chose to interview the participants one on one because participants are more comfortable sharing their stories with just one person than with a group. Interview transcripts are also de-identified, and my participants were given a pseudonym. And the interview transcripts were also analyzed to identify recurring themes. And some of the interview themes that were identified were the views about the causes of depression and anxiety, which include experiences from childhood, from work and school, with their family, including like bullying. And another theme is experiences of depression and anxiety, which includes sleeping, a lack of productivity, crying. Also talked about some of the support and challenges they face. Like some of my participants have access to mental health professionals, while some of them also face some stigma and discrimination with their family. They also talked about recovery, including what recovery means to them, and they also talked about some of their self care and coping strategies. I organized game jam workshops where the first thing I did is to present my findings to the game jam participants. And the game jam participants include both the young people as well as game developers. And the interview findings were presented in this website where it includes some interview transcripts as well as some screenshots from the games that are being developed. Interview findings serve as the starting point for the ideation process. So for the ideation, we use design thinking, and we started by using this Trello board where we have different lists, one for game mechanics, for narrative, for art style. I also included a new one for music, and participants were invited to share as many ideas as they can. So they could add ideas as cards, which are like post-it notes. And because we're using Trello, you could also add links and images, especially for the art style cards. It's really useful for participants to just share images. My participants, the young people, do not need to have a experience with game development, so I also have some short tutorials to teach them about the tools that we use. The games are made using Unity, and we are also using this tool called Yarn Spinner to write the scripts. And it's also very simple for participants to be able to write a script using this tool, and it also allows some branching dialogue. And then we develop the game as a group, and we also release the games. And I will talk about the games later on in the presentation. And we also interviewed the participants and to ask them about their experiences with the game jam workshops. Now let's talk about the games. There's also different ways of representing depression and anxiety in video games. The first approach that I'm going to talk about is the narrative driven, which is a literal approach that portrays depression and anxiety through its narrative writing. One of the games we made through Mental Gem is called Counterattack Therapy. It stars a humanoid cat named Alex who experienced depression after they have gone through an incident at work, which led to their boss being fired. This was based on one of the experiences of one of my participants. That participant also encountered a motorbike accident, and we also incorporated that into the game, which is why Alex has a cast on their arm. Few of my participants talked about how they use singing as a way to cope with their depression and anxiety, so we also incorporated that into the game. And as you can see in the lyrics of the songs, it's portraying some of the thoughts that Alex and some of my participants has. Some of my participants also told me that they spent a lot of time sleeping when they were depressed, and they didn't have any time to organize their room, which is why the room is quite messy. And while we were designing the game, my participants wrote that they want to have like beer bottles, cigarettes, pill bottles in the room. Well, during their interviews, neither of them mentioned it. And it was only at the game jam workshops that they said that one of the participants said that actually during that time she was smoking a lot and drinking a lot. And it's quite interesting because like during the game jam workshops and while we were designing the character and designing the room, they became more open about sharing more information. We also incorporated some of my participants' interests, such as watching anime movies as a coping mechanism. So, one of their favorite animes is Attack on Titan. So, that is why there is an Attack of Titan logo on the jacket. And the main character, Erin, for one of my participants, she felt that Erin represented a lot of the things that she was feeling back then, that society doesn't understand her at all, that people didn't understand what she was feeling, and she wanted to destroy the whole world because she doesn't feel like she fit into this world. And that is why she related with Erin's character. And actually, even the title of the game, Counterattack Kirby, it's based on one of the song titles, Counterattack Mankind, from the Attack of Titan soundtrack. Participants were able to access mental health support. Some of them were accessing them during COVID, which is why it was online through a video call. So as you can see, Alex is talking to their counselor online as well. A few of my participants shared some of their coping mechanisms, which includes breathing exercises, which help ground them. So we incorporated that as a mini game. One of my participants' counselors suggested that they try drawing, while another participant talked about she used art to express some of the things that she's gone through. But because Alex has a cast on their arm, we changed that to a mosaic game instead. While another participant talked about how one of her friends read tarot cards for her that inspired her to focus on other things. So we tried to incorporate that into the game with Oracle tarot cards that gives helpful advice. I'd also like to point out that at the start of the game and when Alex was experiencing severe depression, their fur was really messy and a darker shade. But as you can see, as they are getting better, their fur becomes a bit light colored. And that represents some of the experiences of my participants. Like one participant talked about like when she was depressed, she spent a whole time in her room and her hair got so tangled that her mom had to cut them all out. The next game I want to talk about is called a Morde Soy. So Morde Soy is a concept of self-love by this philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, which means that you are seeing and valuing your own self-worth independent of other people's opinions. So this game is focused on self-love. Normally in video games, you are allowed to select your avatar, such as your skin color, your hair color, but for this game, we try to flip it a bit. You are given a random wheel at the start, and you will randomly assign your hair color and your skin color. A few of my participants are from immigrant backgrounds, and they said that they felt out of place in their school and at their work because sometimes they're the only person of color in their workplace, and they sometimes wish that they didn't have the skin color they did because they just wanted to fit in. And we try to incorporate that concept in the game by having you have this skin color that's randomly assigned to you that you can't change because that's how it is in real life. You're like born with a skin color, and the only thing we can do is to love ourselves, learn to love the color of our skin. Just a note though, the gameplay videos were recorded at different times, which is why the colors of the hair and the clothes are different. And some of my participants also talked about some of their relationships. Some of them described it as emotionally and verbally abusive and toxic. And some of them viewed their breakup as the cause of their depression. For one of the participants, it actually became her pivot point to seek professional help. Well, for another participant, it was one of the reasons why she self-harmed. And another participant, she even got hospitalized. For this game, it starts with a breakup, and the girl starts on her journey to recovery and self-love. Some of my participants talk about how their anxiety makes them overthink and that they're constantly stuck in a dark state and they feel like their thoughts really trap them. So in the game, the girl's thoughts do kind of like run quite quickly. One of my participants talked about how she challenges negative thoughts by imagining that she's talking to a friend. So in this game, we have this character called a pixie, and it's like the character's subconscious that challenges her negative thoughts. Because we tend to be kinder to our friends than we are with ourselves. Participants mentioned that she feels that she's quite self-critical, and some of them talked about how they have really high expectations for themselves and how they have to live up to not just their own expectations but the expectations of their family, their partners. Some of my participants and the character in this game is quite conscious about how she looks like, and the pixie would give her some advice and teach her how to love herself. Two of my participants talked about how when they were depressed, they didn't want to get up, which means that they didn't want to go to school, and their parents were concerned because of their grades. And when one of the participants was deciding a degree to take in uni, she chose an arts course, and her parents did not think much of it because it wasn't a STEM course. While another participant, her mom straight up told her that she cannot take a music degree and she has to do something STEM related. So we tried to incorporate that into the game as well. So the girl is taking up computer science, but she is quite struggling. Some of my participants watch K-dramas and animes too as a self-care mechanism. And for one of my participants, she says that whenever she watches a K-drama, she would find a role model and she would try to model herself after that character. And she learned that through the help of her therapist, like she wanted to be like one of the characters in It's Not Okay Not to Be Okay, because she wanted people to fear her. And her therapist let her know that maybe it's not that she wants to be feared, but rather that she wants to be a more assertive communicator, and that's something that she never even knew about before. Some of my participants also mentioned reading books, like they like to read motivational books to help inspire them. And then other participants talked about how he likes to read a fantasy book series where there are characters with lived experiences of depression and anxiety. And it helped him realize that even though you have these experiences, you can still be successful in life. He also suggested that the girl can declutter all her old photos of her ex-partner. The method that my participants found were quite helpful after their breakup. The participants also shared some of their self-care mechanisms, which includes putting on sheet masks. For this game, we also collaborated with some musicians and they were able to compose a song that one of my participants, the one who wasn't able to pursue music in uni, to sing a song. Next, I'm going to talk about the metaphorical approach, which uses game mechanics to portray metaphors, because metaphors can portray not just the symptoms, but the inside view of what depression feels like. Doris Rush also have a metaphor archaeology method wherein they analyze interview transcript to find traces of structural metaphors. The first game that I'll talk about is called Depression Simulator. As I mentioned before, this game was inspired by the contributions of people's stories and their experiences of depression. This game follows the life of someone with depression. There are different aspects of it that are puzzles that is like representing different aspects, like for example, how difficult it is to wake up in the morning. The alarm clock is a puzzle that you have to solve. It is a point and click game, so you can walk around the room and you can explore. One of the contributors actually talked about how they used to like to hide in the closet when they were feeling scared and anxious. And another contributor talked about how they like to organize their clothes according to color. Yeah, you could just see something jump out of the closet. And that's the negative thoughts. The negative thoughts that keeps on saying things like you're not good enough, and it follows you around. But in the game and also in real life, you can fight it as long as you keep trying. You can defeat it. And then there's the menial tasks like the simple task of cooking and making breakfast. And things like sitting on the sofa all day and just mindlessly staring. Some days you wake up and you can draw a smile on your face and you can go about your everyday tasks like brushing your teeth and you'll be fine. Some days when you wake up and it just feels like rain and you're just like crying and feel like drowning. And then there's this game. It's called Sink or Swim. This game was actually created before I started the mental jams. So I was joining different game jams that also have the theme of mental health. So this was for Games 8's mental health jam, where I decided to explore the use of a metaphor to show what depression feels like to me. And it feels like sinking, it feels like drowning, and it feels like I don't have control. So I try to use this game mechanics wherein it's purposely difficult for you to control the player. I've also included passages from my journal, which I've written before, and in order to guide the player, I also use binaural audio that hints where the next, I just call them shiny things, are. And And because the game is so hard to control, like you see a glimpse of that shiny thing, but it's just slightly out of reach. But you can keep trying and try to gain control. And at the end of the day, things will get better and you can swim up. The music also changes as you are swimming through, as you swim up. As you can see, the guitar solo starts playing, and I will float back up eventually. And then there's this game called Kitsuki, which is the Japanese art of repairing broken ceramics with gold. And it's also about embracing your damages and imperfections because they're all part of who we are. And the use of metaphors, I am able to portray that image of being broken and then that effort that I need to take to put myself back together. And after you assemble each ceramics bag, I also show a quote, and they're usually themed around resilience and grit. One of my personal mantras is this one: fall down 7 times, but we get up 8. So we don't give up. For one of my participants, she found the mental gem experience quite life-changing and quite mind-changing because her story, she thought that it was something very negative, like a bad memory that she just wanted to forget, that she wanted to put inside a drawer and then lock away and never talk about again. But through this game jam and through making a game from her experience, she realized that with the right strategies and with the help of her team members, and she was able to turn it into something positive that can inspire other people. This game was released on itch.io and it was featured on the RMIT University Vietnam's page as well as on a local Vietnamese lifestyle website. Have been very positive and very encouraging for both me and my participants. Other key findings from the research is the benefit of working in teams. Because we are also collaborating with other game developers, my participants with lived experience of depression and anxiety, they don't need to have an experience in game development. Unlike Danilovic's research, where her participants needed all the skills required to make a game. So other research, such as the Street Arcade, collaborated with a group of teenagers and game developers to develop video games. For their project, the teens contributed to the game design, narrative, and art for the games, while the game developers were the ones who programmed them. So similarly, for my game jams, my participants, some of them contributed to the narrative, all of them contributed to the game design, while some participants contributed to the music, and I, as a programmer and artist, I was in charge of programming the game and making some artworks. There's also a sense of belonging One of the participants mentioned that collaborating online with distance teams was quite helpful when we were using Trello because even though we are quite far apart, my participants for one of the game jams were actually based in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh while I was based in Melbourne, and we used Trello to communicate. And during the week, seeing we are updating each other on our progress by using Trello, and for her, seeing that updates make gives her a sense of belonging, of a shared social experience. My participants also learned new skills and they found the game jam workshops quite rewarding because they were able to develop a game, some of them for the first time. And prior research on game jams have also found that making games is entertaining even for newcomers. My participants also found a venue to reflect and share their lived experiences of depression and anxiety. Through the game jam workshops and developing the game, my participants found a way to reflect on their experiences and share them to people in a different way because we were composed creating composite characters of all of their experiences and in such a way my participant felt that she was able to share her story with the players without being very direct about it. And other research in this area also found that participants with psychosis and dementia found that the use of a relatable fictional character allows them to share their lived experiences in an indirect way. So, for one of the examples that I mentioned earlier, how about how one of my participants were only talking and giving more information about her how she was drinking and how she was smoking during the game jam workshops. Other knowledge translation projects also found that it has the potential to be transformative because it explores different ways of sharing knowledge about mental distress that can lead to an empathetic and compassionate knowing, which can benefit the audience, or in my case, the players of the game. My research will not be developing game for therapeutic purposes. Instead, the focus is to produce video games as a form of knowledge translation of the lived experiences of depression and anxiety to foster empathy and mental health awareness. As my research applies the participatory action research methodology, it engages participants in all phases of the research, from design to execution and dissemination. So for this research, my participants were involved in every step of the process, from the ideation of the game design to development of the games to even the release and marketing of the games. And this research ensures that the participants' voices are heard throughout the process, and they have the final say of what goes into the video games and how their lived experiences are represented. And I also found that my participants were actually quite open about sharing their lived experiences of depression and anxiety during the interviews and game jam workshops. And I think that working closely with my participants in the game jam workshops over a few weekends also allows rapport building between me, the researcher, and my participants. Participatory action research is also a methodology that is a collaborative process where different stakeholders, including me, the researcher, my participants who are young people with lived experiences of depression and anxiety, and the game developers that we work with, we work together through an iterative process of reflection and action to solve a problem. And the process itself is just as important as the outcome. Participatory action research is also a user-centered approach where my participants are the real experts of their experience. And because they are involved in every step of their research, it gives them a sense of empowerment. And even my research approach, it is an iterative process, and I take everything that I've learned from the game jams that have already been conducted, as well as the feedback from my participants, to constantly improve the research approach and improve the knowledge translation of the lived experiences of depression and anxiety through video games. My research isn't over yet. I am still recruiting more participants and I will be creating more games about the lived experiences of depression and anxiety. So if you're interested, feel free to email me or message me via social media. And if you have any questions, I am hanging around in the chat. And thank you for listening.